Two powerhouse programs collide in the college football playoff as Ohio State takes on Tennessee. But when you break it down, the Buckeyes have the edge.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to your feel-good Friday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, which is your daily Ohio State podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. During today's show, Max Chadwick of PFF will be joining us to dive into Ohio State's first-round home playoff game against Tennessee. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes on a Friday, it is a man that is a college football analyst for PFF, and he's also one of the co-hosts on PFF's college football show. It's Max Chadwick. He was with us, I think, earlier in the year, and he's here with us again on a Friday. It's game week before the Buckeyes host the Volunteers in the CFP. Man, I can't wait for this game to be played.
Yeah, Jay's for having me on again, man. This is going to be, I think, the most anticipated playoff matchup, honestly. I just kind of show how anticipated it is. My co-host and I, Dalton, are trying to go to, we were trying to go to both the Notre Dame game and the Ohio State game. We were able to get into the Notre Dame game, get credentialed for it, but the Ohio State unfortunately told us, hey, we don't have enough credentials, so you guys can't actually come to this game. So I think everyone and their mother is trying to go to that game right now, and I think it is probably the hottest first-round game that we have.
I think it is as well. And as I think about that game specifically, think about how Ohio State has been built. They have guys that are like NFL talent all over the field. Offensive line, there are some hiccups there, the injuries. But outside of that, Ohio State, I believe, is built to beat Tennessee, beat a team like Tennessee. That's one of the benefits for Ohio State going into this game. They are built and they're solid really across the board. And no matter really what Tennessee is going to throw at them, I think Ohio State's going to have an answer.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it should be a really, really fun game. I think it could be a low-scoring game. I think both offensive lines could really struggle in this one. And obviously, if your offensive line struggles, you really struggle to do anything offensively. So I think it could be an ugly football game. I really do. I think it could be a really close game that comes down to the final minutes. I am really excited for this game, but I don't think it's going to be a shootout by any means.
No, I don't either. And normally, I think Ryan Day's offenses can go ahead and make it a shootout. I do think the offense will look a little bit different than it has the past, like the last half of the season. But a shootout to me is not what I think this is going to be. I think it's going to be one of those football games we're talking about 10, 15 years down the road because of how good these teams are, how even they kind of are across the board. Where do you think Ohio State has an edge over Tennessee in this game?
I think there's a few things I look at. I do think Ohio State's probably just the better team overall. The only real advantage I see for Tennessee as of right now is their defensive line against the Ohio State offensive line, and that could wreck a game, right? We saw it in the Michigan game, and Ohio State lost that because of it, right? Michigan's defensive line dominated Ohio State that entire day there. So there's a chance that could happen again against Tennessee. Now, I don't think Tennessee's got the defensive line as good as Michigan's, but it's still one of the better defensive lines that we have in college football. So that's one advantage for Tennessee, I think. But other than that, I mean, I think Ohio State's probably biggest advantage they have, in my opinion, probably is their own defensive line against the Tennessee offensive line that has also struggled a lot this season. So that I think the two defensive lines in this game could really dominate out there, and why I think this game could be pretty ugly.
The Buckeyes defensive line has not got a lot of attention lately. Even myself, I've been talking a lot about the offensive line and Will Howard. And even though it was a few weeks ago, we're still talking about that Michigan loss because it's a big, big deal. But I think a luxury for the Buckeyes D-line is that they're kind of just sneaking under the radar, not getting a lot of attention. Tyke Williams got banged up a little bit this year. He didn't really have the pop that we're used to him having when he's on the field. But a few weeks off the field, he's getting healthier. Toy Allen Sawyer and Ty Hamilton, they don't want their last game of the shoe to be a loss. So it's a luxury for them, but I think it's a massive advantage that they're just kind of pedaling along, just moving along kind of quietly, going into this game where Tennessee's O-line could be an issue for the Volunteers. Also, it may be an issue because the Buckeyes D-line, they're hungry to get back on the field and to show everybody they are one of the best units in the country.
Yeah, I think Jack Sawyer is probably looking his chops right now after everything that happened in that Michigan game, obviously. But yeah, I was just looking it up right now. right now Tennessee is 74th in the country in pass blocking grade, and they're 85th in the country in run blocking grade. So this is an offensive line that struggled. This is well below average offensive line that we have in college football right now. And like we said before, Ohio State has probably one of the 3 to 5 best defensive lines in America, in my opinion. I mean, really, they're stacked everywhere on that defensive line, and even the second level too at the linebackers. I really like Cody Simon. Sonny Styles is a really good player as well. They are really good at when they want to blitz them and send them up as well. And then even the secondary. I mean, like Lathan Ransom is a dog of a run defender. I think he's outstanding there. I think Caleb Downs is a very, very good run defender as well. So, I mean, everyone can defend the run at Ohio State. And also the defensive line is very good at rushing the passer as well. Yeah, like I said, it is a big, big mismatch for that Ohio State defensive line against the Tennessee offensive line, in my opinion.
Let's stick right there at those numbers, because you looked and talked about Tennessee's rushing, run blocking, and then pass pro. What about Ohio State's O-line? I know it'll be a different look potentially in the game this coming weekend, so it's not like comparing what we saw against Michigan to what we'll see against Tennessee. But what do the numbers say about Ohio State's O-line as far as how they stack up against other teams in the country?
It struggled. It really has. And that's really the kryptonite of Ohio State right now, and why they lost to Michigan. And even their 2 lowest grades as an offensive line this year, their 2 lowest graded games, I should say, were Oregon and Michigan, which is their 2 losses this year, right? So obviously it's really hard if your offensive line is not blocking well. And you look at what they've done. So I kind of looked at since week 7, which is when Josh Simmons went down with that injury, and obviously Seth McLaughlin went down later on. There's 2 outstanding players. Obviously Simmons, we think, could be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, even with the injury. McLaughlin just won the Remington Award, given the best center in college football. So since week 7, when Simmons went down, they have a 56 offensive line grade. That's the 7th worst in the Power 4, and it's the 14th worst in the nation. So this is an offensive line that's struggled really big time. And it sucks, because I really think if you have your left tackle and Josh Simmons, it could be a first-round pick. And if you have your Remington Award-winning center out there, it could actually be a pretty damn good offensive line. But now it's reshuffled. They're banged up. Donovan Jackson, who I think is an excellent guard, is playing out of position at left tackle now. He's doing the best he can out there. That's the kryptonite. If Ohio State is not going to win a national championship this year, it's going to be because of the offensive line, in my opinion. I know a lot of the finger pointing might be going to Will Howard, because obviously whenever a team loses points to the quarterback is always the easiest thing to do. In my opinion, though, I mean, the reason why they lost that Michigan game, Will Howard didn't play well, but the reason why he didn't play well is because the offensive line was horrible against Michigan. And I think if they don't win a national title, and even if they don't win this game, I think it's going to be because of the offensive line. So that is why I am worried about this Ohio State offensive line in this game, in future games as well. But I do think they're talented everywhere else, right? They have one of the best defenses in America. I do think Will Howard, when kept clean, is one of the better quarterbacks in America. Obviously, the receiving core is stacked with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. The run game has been very hit or miss this year, but I think that's a product of the offensive line not really blocking well at all. You still have 2 stars in Quinshawn Junkins and Travion Henderson back in that backfield. So they're stacked everywhere, but the one problem is, the offensive line is just not playing well. In fact, not even not playing well. They're playing like one of the 15 worst offensive lines in the country over the last several weeks.
Max and I are going to continue this conversation about the Buckeyes offensive line and how it stacks up against Tennessee's D-line, and how the O-line will either help or hurt the Buckeyes rushing attack on Saturday night. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. This episode is brought to you by Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus has the best selection of pool tables, game tables, shuffleboard tables, and more. And the best service is Central Ohio. And now is the time to reserve a table so you can unwrap years of family fun on Christmas morning. Everything you need for in-home and backyard entertainment is at Billiards Plus. They are family-owned and operated, and when you talk to the staff at Billiards Plus, you know you're talking to an expert who won't steer you wrong. No matter the season, Billiards Plus has you covered for all your indoor and outdoor entertainment needs. Kenny, Sarah, and the whole staff will always go above and beyond to give you the best customer service in the industry. Billiards Plus. Visit their showroom on Dublin Center Drive in Dublin. Now, Max, I am one that believes that Quinshon Junkins and Trevion Henderson, if they were behind a fully healthy O-line for 12 games in a row, we're looking at them a whole lot differently than we are right now. I think both guys are still really good and really talented, but they really didn't have the production this year that I thought they were going to have, and I'm sure you thought their production would have been better this year as well. In regards to the O-line at Ohio State that's been banged up and been moving pieces around the last half of the year, should fans expect the Buckeyes rushing game to be different than it was the final 3 games of the regular season?
It's tough. There's another stat that I found when diving into this game a little bit. And again, I think there's a really important demarcation for this offensive line before Simmons goes down and after Simmons goes down. So prior to that Oregon game, since all the games up leading to that Oregon game, they were averaging 7 yards per carry between the tackles when they were running between the tackles. Since week 7, since that Oregon game, they're averaging 4.2 yards per carry between the tackles, which is like a little more than half, right, of what they did before. So again, it's easy to not look at the offensive line because not a lot of people watch the offensive line, right? We all watch the quarterback. We all watch the wide receivers. We all watch the running backs. It's very easy for fans to diagnose, the problem is the running backs are not doing anything. Honestly, the offensive line is what makes everything go, right? I know it's kind of the least sexy position to talk about in football, but it might be, besides quarterback, maybe the most important thing to have in football is to have an offensive line that's capable of blocking right now. And we here at PFF are big believers in that your run game is just as important to have a good offensive line than it is to have good running backs, honestly. And Ohio State's kind of seeing that right now is that their offensive line's struggling. And 2 guys that we thought would be top 5 running backs in the country entering the year, I thought would be easily the best run game in college football going into the year. They've been struggling right now because they don't have the offensive lines blocking for them. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Junkins and Henderson have not struggled at times this year. I'm not saying none of it's their fault at all. No, I also have not really been that impressed by them, mostly Junkins this season. But I do think they really have a chance out there. So, yeah, maybe they can create a little bit more on their own, but it's very hard for you to expect that out of them when the offensive line is struggling this much. And again, it sucks. I hate calling out the offensive line like this because it really is an injury thing, right? It's not like they're just playing bad football right now. They've just been ravaged by injuries, key injuries too. I would probably say their 2 best, or at least 2 of their 3 best offensive linemen are now out for the season with injuries. I mean, that it's hard for any offensive line to recover from that. And Ohio State's unfortunately taking their lumps for that right now.
It's tough, man, because I think this is a game where Junkins should be featured more than Henderson as far as in the rushing attack. I still think Henderson is going to get his touches no matter what, but I feel like this more of a Quinshon Junkins type of game where you just give him the ball and just let him rock. I have my own nerves about just letting them run the ball, and it's not because of them. I think Junkins has been a little frustrated this year with the way things have gone with the offensive line, some of the play calling. I think Henderson is also frustrated, but you don't see that frustration the same way Junkins displays his frustration. But, man, this game, the one way to have Will Howard get a little bit more comfortable is to establish that run. I get nervous about that because Ryan Day's talking about maybe using a guy in Luke Montgomery who hasn't really played much this year, so you're trying to implement somebody else in what could be your final game of the season. That makes me nervous. If you don't put him in there, I'm still nervous. I think Will Howard might be nervous about the fact that his rushing game might not be there. And it all is not only because of the Buckeyes' offensive line, Tennessee's defensive line is really, really good. I don't know what the numbers say about that. That's your job, Max, but my gut says the numbers back up what our eyeballs tell us, that Tennessee's D-line is one of the best we're going to see in the playoff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Tennessee defensive line is ferocious. They have the 13th best run D grade right now and the 10th best pass rushing grade right now. So this is a bad matchup for Ohio State's offensive line, very much so. And that stat I mentioned before of running between the tackles, I think is key in this game because Tennessee has the third highest graded defense in college football when teams run off tackle. When they try to get outside in Tennessee, they can't do it, right? They got stud edge defenders in James Pierce Jr., Joshua Joseph. Pierce has gotten a lot better in run defense than what he was last year. Their linebackers fly around the football as well. Their secondary does a really good job in run support. So if you're trying to go off tackle on them, it's not going to work. But Tennessee's 59th in the country when you run between the tackles. So I think if Ohio State can just run it down their throat, run up the gut, they might have an opportunity in this game. Now, easier said than done, right? I just mentioned before how their rushing production between the tackles has been cut in half since Simmons went down with that injury. But I think that is the key in this game. I think they are not going to be able to probably get outside on Tennessee too much. I think they really just got to go right up the middle, right up the A gap, right up the B gap, and try to punch Tennessee in the mouth with their run game. I don't think you're going to be able to bounce it outside against Tennessee. So I think the run game for Ohio State is going to be a lot of it between the tackles, in my opinion. I don't really think it's going to work on the outside too much.
One thing I think that can help the offensive line drastically is read options, where it is a true read option, where it's Will Howard, read the guy at the end of the line. Do you want to give it to the running back or do you want to keep it yourself? And I think Will Howard can be more of a running threat in this game more than he has been the previous 12, where I think Will Howard's legs and his athleticism have not really been used to the best of its ability, because I think Will Howard has some more in the tank and he's able to get outside a little bit and use his speed and his size to move the ball downfield with his legs. And I think it's one area where you can somewhat neutralize or slow down the edge defenders that Tennessee has, because if they're able to pick and just go, it's going to make it a whole lot easier for them if Will Howard's not using his legs. But if they're second guessing and if they're taking one false step here, one false step there, either Junkins, Henderson, Ibuka, whoever gets that handoff, Jeremiah Smith, they could be off to the races because Will Howard is a true dual threat when he's out there on the field.
I think it's a great point. Yeah, I think the RPO is so successful. Why you see offenses not only in college football, but also in the NFL utilize it so heavily. It freezes the defense, right? You make them pause for a second and say, okay, what's going on right now? Does the running back have the football? Does the quarterback have the football? Is the quarterback running with the football? Is the quarterback going to throw it over my head? That, I think, is a big key as well. And I think Ohio State has obviously the receivers that scare you. They really do scare you. I mean, they have an alien in Jeremiah Smith, who a lot of people have comped to like Julio Jones, AJ Green, and all the lofty comparisons that are probably warranted for this kid. I mean, he is truly special. And then Emeka Egbuka is going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft this year. Cardinal Tate is maybe the best wide receiver 3 in college football right now, right? So they've got receivers that should terrify any opposing defense. So if you're running RPO and you freeze for a second, you just mentioned before, Will Howard can take off and run. Yeah, but Will Howard can also pull that ball from the running back's stomach, keep it himself, and not take off and run. He could throw it over the middle and maybe do a slant route to Egbuka or a slant route to Jeremiah Smith or something else as well. That RPO doesn't have to just be the run game, right? It doesn't have to just be a read option run game. It could be a run. That's why it says RPO, run pass option, right? So that, I think, is a big part of this game as well. If you can freeze that defensive line from just pinning their ears back and getting after you, that might be the key in this game as well. I think just slowing Tennessee's defensive line down enough where they have to think. If you don't let them just go out there and play off instinct, it's going to be a bad night for Ohio State's offense, in my opinion. But if you make them stop, pause, and think for even a second, that probably would open up a lot of avenues, not only for Junkins, not only for Henderson, not only for Will Howard on the ground, but also in the pass game as well. Howard going over the middle to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. I think that RPO game, that's a great point by you, honestly, Jay. I think that could be a big, big part of this Ohio State offense.
Let's go and stick with Tennessee. At least one guy on Tennessee that's going to be a big piece of their pie if they're going to be able to win the game. Nico, and I'm not going to try to say his last name. I can say it off air. I can't do it on air. He's a good quarterback, but he's young. He's inexperienced, and he's going into a massive stage where it's a first for everybody. First for Will Howard, first for Nico, first for Drew Aller. No one's ever had a first-round home playoff game in the playoff in college football, so it's a first for everybody. So Nico's kind of the guinea pig. How do you do playing a road playoff game in the shoe? It's going to be a massive test. No matter how many Tennessee fans are there, Tennessee still has struggles on the road. And I think Nico's struggles are just due to his inexperience, but then when you add in Tennessee's struggles on the road, I think that could be a recipe for disaster, or they could find a way to use their previous issues on the road as fuel in the game and play spoiler to Ohio State.
Yeah, I think that's big. And I think for Nico, the key in this game for him, in my opinion, is attacking the outside of Ohio State's defense. Because if you just look at the rating and how they played this year, Ohio State has the 6th highest graded defensive line in college football, the 9th highest graded linebackers in college football, the highest graded safeties in college football, and they're 98th in corners.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that is the problem.
So bad.
Right? Like, that's the problem. And guys that we thought, going into the year were going to be stars. Like Denzel Burke is a guy that a lot of people had as a first-round pick going into the year. Igbenogson is another guy that a lot of people like for the NFL draft as well. But we saw it, right? We saw it in the Oregon game. Like, Denzel Burke was getting picked on in that Oregon game. It was the worst game of his career, in my opinion. And then you look at even the Indiana game a little bit. Igbenogson was getting picked on early in that Indiana game. He had a lot of penalties early on in that game, and so much so that Matthews had to come in and spell him for a little bit as well. So that, I think, is the one kryptonite of the Ohio State defense as well, because they're elite everywhere else. Their defensive line is disgustingly good. Their linebackers are outstanding. They have the best safeties in college football, in my opinion. But the one thing they don't have is an elite outside cornerback room right now. So I think that is the one thing. And Tennessee loves to throw on the outside, right? They love those goal balls on the outside. They got the speed to beat defenses on the outside, like Chris Brazzell, Brew McCoy, and guys, Dante Thornton and guys like that. And Nico obviously loves throwing those goal balls as well. I'm really watching that, and I'm really seeing how Nico does, and if he can, get some matchups that he likes against Burke and against Igbenogson and Ohio State's other corners. That's the one thing on Ohio State's defense that's not elite. Their corners are not elite right now. They're not playing at an elite level right now. Now, we've seen Burke play really well before. Igbenogson been a good player before, right? So there is a chance that they bounce back from this. But what we've seen from him all year has been well below average play, honestly. So that, I think, is the key in this game, is whether or not Tennessee can throw outside the numbers on Ohio State.
We're going to continue this conversation here after the break and dive more into Will Howard, what he can do with his arm to lead the Buckeyes to victory. This episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff, because it's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back. And with a newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Max, I am a person that when I think about Will Howard and the emotion that he plays with, he can use that as fuel. And I have to go back to a few weeks ago, because that was the worst game he's played in the Buckeye uniform, and it was against the team that you just can't lose to in Michigan. Use that as fuel and allow that to propel you and to help you in this game on Saturday. But also, I'm a little nervous because Will Howard's not a C.J. Stroud thrower. He is not even a Justin Fields thrower or Dwayne Haskins. He's none of those guys. He's more J.T. Barrett, but he has some different qualities than J.T. Barrett possessed about a decade ago in Columbus. In this game, I think Ryan Day wants to do more of a Stroud game plan against Georgia, or more of a Dwayne Haskins, where just throwing the ball a lot. That's not Will Howard's strength. And sometimes if you have Will Howard throw the ball too much, it could lead to disaster. I don't know what the numbers say about Will Howard's play first half of the year versus back half or anything like that. But I do know Will Howard can get the job done, and he's had a career year. And if he's able to just settle in, get into a rhythm, that could be good news for the Buckeyes offense.
It really can be. And I think he's actually played pretty well this year. I really think the problem has been him. I really think all the problems have been the offensive line. And even the running backs have not played as well as they probably should have going into the year. But the offensive line, I think, gets a brunt of the blame right now. But I mentioned before how, the two lowest graded games for Ohio State's offensive line was Oregon and Michigan. Well, one of the games, Will Howard was spectacular. And I thought he was excellent in that Oregon game, and he almost won that game. I mean, Ohio State put up 31 points on Oregon in that game. They lost by 1. The Michigan game obviously was bad. Now, that I think exposes a problem for Ohio State maybe in this game, is that play under pressure is very volatile, right? It's not stable at all. guys can be outstanding in one game and they could really stink in another game. And I think you even saw it in Will Howard. Like, he was outstanding under pressure against Oregon, and he did not play well under pressure at all against Michigan. It's not something that you can rely on game in and game out. So I think for Ohio State, obviously you don't want him playing under pressure at all, but odds are he's probably playing under pressure a lot because of how good the Tennessee defensive line is and how much the Ohio State's offensive line struggled. So I think if you're Ohio State, you're kind of hoping that you see the Oregon version of Will Howard in this game, not the Michigan version. Because if you get the Oregon version and he's able to create under pressure like Stroud did against Georgia, right, in that game as well, where Stroud was magical under pressure when nobody really thought that was in his game at all going into that one, I think you're kind of hoping, not maybe from that kind of performance. I think that was a legendary performance from C.J. Stroud. I don't think you're going to get that from Will Howard, but I think you want something along the lines of what he did in the Oregon game, because I thought he was the best player on the field for Ohio State in that Oregon game. If he can do that in this one, I don't know how Tennessee's going to stop Ohio State's offense, honestly. So that, I think, is the really big matchup to watch, is how does Will Howard perform under pressure? Will it look like a lot like how he looked against Oregon, where he was outstanding and almost won that game? Or will it look like the Michigan game where, they couldn't even put 20 points on the board or anything like that? That, I think, is the big matchup to watch for me for Will Howard.
What about these coaches? I have not done really any digging into Josh Heupel at all this week. Really, even Ryan Day. I think more Ryan Day is more psychological. I think Josh Heupel's a really good coach. I have no really bad thing to say about him right now with how he's leading the Volunteers program. Do you think Ryan Day has the upper hand as far as in the coaching battle between him and Josh Heupel?
I think he could, only because I love the coordinators for Ohio State. I think what they have in Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles is, it might be the best in the sport, honestly. Like, I think Jim Knowles, you can make an argument he's one of, if not a top 3 or 5 defensive coordinator that we have in college football right now. Like, he is ridiculously good. Chip Kelly obviously is a legendary coach himself, coached the Philadelphia Eagles as their head coach, coached the Oregon all the way to the national title game as well. Obviously, he was the UCLA head coach as soon as last year. So I think these are 2 coordinators that are outstanding. Now, I like Ryan Day. I think Ryan Day is a good coach. I think this game is massive for him. Obviously, I don't know if he keeps his job if they lose this game, honestly. I don't know if that's possible. So I think this is a huge game for him, and we'll see how they respond to that kind of pressure. But I might give the slight advantage to Ohio State's coaches in this game. A lot of it because of I just love the coordinator pair that he has in Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles.
Who wins the game?
I got Ohio State. I do. I think they'll survive. It's tough because I can see this becoming a just hideous football game where Tennessee's defensive line just dominates. And like I said, if your offensive line is struggling that much, even no matter how good your weapons are, you're going to struggle as an offense. So I could see that happening, and it could look a lot like the Michigan game in some respects. But I think Ohio State's more talented than Tennessee. I also think the Ohio State defense is going to dominate in this one as well. I think they'll hold Dylan Sampson in check, hold Nico Iamaleava in check as well. I think Ohio State wins. I had it 24-17. I could see it being a game that's like a 17-14 kind of game. I could see this being a game where neither team scores 20 points. I think it really could be an ugly game. But I do have the Buckeyes eking out a close win. And I do think the home field advantage will play a little bit of a part as well.
I'm right there with you. I got Ohio State winning 24-20, and I was debating that really up until I made my official pick for the game. I think Ohio State's, like I said earlier, we both agree they're built to win this game. The injuries kind of make me nervous. Coming off that loss to Michigan makes me nervous. Not knowing what you're going to get from Ryan Day or the players, that makes me nervous. But if you get what Ohio State should bring to the table, Ohio State wins this game by 4 points, literally. But I think I saw FanDuel had it at 7.5. To me, that spread's too large. Mm-hmm. I don't think Ohio Stadium is one of those stadiums where you're going to get a 4 or 5 point bump just because you're playing there. I just don't view that, at least in this game. I got Ohio State winning 24-20, getting a rematch with Oregon in the Rose Bowl, and that is going to be one of those games where I'm hyped for this game already. A rematch in that stadium on New Year's Day. Sign me up for that every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Oh, dude, that'd be awesome. And I think if Ohio State wins this game, I think Ryan Day is going to take a sigh of relief, because I think he's coaching for his job in this game. I really do. I think if he loses this game, there's been a lot of stuff I saw on the Pat McAfee show yesterday. Dan Orlovsky was saying, Mike Vrabel, eyeing the Ohio State job and all that. But I think that's something that could happen if Ryan Day loses this game. Now, if he wins this game and then loses to Oregon, it's a harder conversation, in my opinion, because then at least you have the the excuse of, well, we lost to the best team in the country. Now, some people can come back and say, well, you were supposed to be the best team in the country with how much money you spent in NIL this year. So you can have that. But at least it's easier to stomach the Oregon loss. If you lose at home to Tennessee right after losing to Michigan, and you're supposed to be this team that, obviously spent $20 million on this roster going into the year. Everyone thought this was the year to win a national title. The roster is going to lose a lot of veteran players, obviously, after this year. So it's going to be a very, very young team next year. This seems like the year, right, for Ohio State. I don't know if Ryan Day can survive losing to Tennessee. I would doubt it, actually. I don't know if he can. He might be able to survive losing to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Now, that's another conversation for another day. I don't. Again, it might be even more than that. You might have to beat Oregon in order to do that. I have no idea what the feeling is in that building right now and among the administrators who make that call. But this is a game that there's a nervous energy for, I think, Ryan Day right now. Whereas if you win this game, you can kind of go into the Oregon game and play a lot more free, saying, okay, now, let's just play football now. Let's not worry about any of the outside stuff. Let's go. Let's move on to Oregon and try to beat them and try to get revenge on them. Whereas this one, I do think there's a little bit of nervous energy in Columbus right now.
I really appreciate Max Chadwick coming on the show the day before the game, Ohio State and Tennessee in the first round of the college football playoff. I can't wait for it. He is a college football analyst at PFF, and he's also one of the co-hosts on PFF's college football show. Follow him on Twitter at CFB Max Chadwick. Follow me on the same platform at JSteven07. Guys, we're up out of here on a Friday. It's a feel-good Friday. It's cold outside. You sit back, relax on your couch, get your popcorn or your wings or chips and salsa, whatever it is. We got ball tonight. We got ball all day tomorrow. I can't wait.